I never thought I'd be the one to destroy my father's empire. But then again, I never thought the woman I loved would turn out to be the architect of our family's undoing. My name is Ethan Lawrence, and this is the story of how my fiancé dismantled everything my father had built over 40 years, not with corporate espionage or legal maneuvers, but with a salad, a lie, and a diary filled with fabricated memories. They say Chicago is a city built on secrets. The skyscrapers that define our skyline rise from foundations poured in darkness, mixed with whispered deals and silent handshakes. My father understood this better than anyone. Victor Lawrence didn't. Just develop property in the Windy City. He cultivated influence, harvested favors, and constructed an impenetrable fortress of wealth and connections that seemed invincible. Until Rachel Parker walked into our lives with calculated precision and a smile that should have warned me something wasn't right. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how thoroughly we were deceived, you need to know what kind of man my father was and what kind of son I had become under his shadow. Before Rachel, I was exactly what my father had groomed me to be. A legacy in waiting, Harvard Business School, summer internships at Goldman Sachs, the perfect pedigree to eventually take over Lawrence Development Group. I worked 18-hour days trying to earn the respect my father never freely gave, taking on the projects no one else wanted, fixing problems with a ruthless efficiency that even impressed the old man. "You're learning," he'd say, the closest thing to praise he ever offered. This business isn't for the faint of heart. And it wasn't. I'd watched him destroy competitors with a phone call, rezone neighborhoods with a campaign contribution, and transform historical districts into luxury condominiums despite community protests. The Lawrence way was to win at all costs, and I was a dutiful student, until I met Rachel at a charity auction for Chicago Children's Hospital. She was different from the women who usually circled our family's orbit, not impressed by the Lawrence name, seemingly uninterested in the fortune behind it. When I mentioned my father's latest development project, she challenged its impact on affordable housing in the area. "Just because you can build something doesn't mean you should," she said, her dark eyes holding mine without apology. I was captivated. Here was someone who saw beyond the Lawrence facade, someone who made me question the values I'd absorbed without thinking. Within 6 months, I was proposing with my grandmother's ring, a 6-carat diamond that had witnessed 3 generations of Lawrence marriages. Looking back, I should have questioned why my father delayed meeting her for so long. But Rachel had a way of making me focus only on her, on us, on the future we were planning. "Is the table set the way your father likes it?" Rachel asked, adjusting the crystal wine glasses for the 3rd time. Her hands trembled slightly, though I attributed it to the natural anxiety of meeting my parents before our wedding. We'd been engaged for 6 months, but this was the first time she'd be meeting my father, Victor Lawrence, Chicago real estate mogul, and notoriously difficult to impress. She'd insisted on hosting at our newly purchased Gold Coast condo, rather than at my parents' Lake Forest estate. "Neutral territory," she'd explained with a nervous smile. Now, watching her meticulously arrange every detail, I realized how important this night was to her. The doorbell rang, and Rachel straightened her black dress, took a deep breath, and nodded at me. Showtime. She looked stunning that evening, her dark hair swept up elegantly, her slender figure accentuated by the designer dress we'd picked out together. Yet there was something almost severe in her beauty now, a sharpness I hadn't noticed before. I brushed the thought aside as pre-dinner nerves. My parents arrived in characteristic fashion. My mother, Diane, entered first with air kisses and compliments about our newly purchased downtown condo, while my father surveyed the space with the calculating eye of someone who had built half of Chicago's luxury high-rises. 23rd floor, he noted immediately. South-facing. You're overpaying by about $400 per square foot, but the building has potential. Victor, my mother chided softly, handing me a bottle of Bordeaux worth more than most people's monthly rent. We're here to celebrate, not evaluate. My father shrugged unapologetically, his imposing 6'3" frame making our spacious living room feel suddenly cramped. At 62, he still maintained the physique and presence of a man decades younger, silver-streaked dark hair immaculately styled, his custom Tom Ford suit a quiet declaration of power. "Rachel," he said, extending his hand. "Finally we meet. Ethan has been quite secretive about you." "Not secretive," Rachel corrected with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just protective." My father's eyebrow raised slightly. No one contradicted Victor Lawrence, especially not upon first meeting. "I see." "So," my father said, fixing his gaze on Rachel after preliminary introductions, "Ethan tells me you work in art restoration. Fascinating field." Rachel nodded. "I specialize in paper conservation. Old documents, photographs, items with history." "History," my father repeated, something flickering across his face. "I've always believed that looking backward is less profitable than looking forward." "Perhaps," Rachel replied, her voice steady. "But sometimes the past catches up, doesn't it? No matter how far forward you run." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. My mother laughed nervously. "Well, this wine isn't going to drink itself. Shall we sit down?" Dinner progressed with the usual small talk. My father dominated the conversation, sharing stories of his latest development project while my mother nodded appreciatively. Rachel was uncharacteristically quiet, watching my father with an intensity that seemed odd. When she brought out the salad, I noticed something change in her demeanor. "I made this especially for you, Mr. Lawrence," she said, placing a plate in front of my father. "Ethan mentioned it's your recipe." My father looked down at the plate, then back at Rachel. "You've done your homework." "More than you know," she replied with a smile that seemed almost predatory. He took a forkful, then paused. "The aroma is different. Not quite how I remember my recipe." "I added my own touch," Rachel said. "A special ingredient." My father chewed slowly, his expression unreadable. "Interesting choice." The meal continued, but I noticed my father barely touched his salad, instead rearranging it on his plate. When Rachel excused herself to bring coffee, he quickly swapped his plate with hers. "Dad," I whispered, "what are you doing?" "Testing a theory," he replied cryptically. Rachel returned with coffee service, seemingly unaware of the switch. She absent-mindedly took a few bites of the salad my father had placed before her. 20 minutes later, she clutched her throat, gasping for air. Her body went rigid, then collapsed. "Call 911!" I screamed, rushing to her side. My father stood perfectly still, watching as Rachel convulsed on our dining room floor. "I wouldn't touch her," he said calmly. "Whatever she put in that salad, it wasn't meant for her." The ambulance ride was a blur, sirens wailing through Chicago's night streets, paramedics shouting medical terms I barely comprehended, Rachel's body seizing, then going terrifyingly still beneath oxygen masks and monitoring equipment. I held her hand until they pushed me away at the emergency entrance of Northwestern Memorial. "Sir, you need to stay in the waiting area," a nurse instructed firmly as they wheeled Rachel through double doors. "She's my fiancée," I protested weakly. "We'll update you as soon as we can." I paced the sterile hospital corridor while doctors pumped Rachel's stomach. My father sat in a vinyl chair, his hands folded in his lap, as if waiting for a business meeting. My mother had gone to arrange a private room, the Lawrence name ensuring the best care available, regardless of visiting hours or hospital policy. "She tried to poison me," my father said flatly, checking his watch as if this emergency were an inconvenient scheduling conflict. "That's insane," I snapped. "Why would Rachel want to hurt you? She doesn't even know you." My father's gaze was steady, unflinching. "Are you certain about that?" "Of course I'm certain. I've known her for over a year. We're getting married in 3 months, for God's sake." He shook his head slightly, the gesture dismissive. "You know what she's told you. That's not the same thing." "So what? You think my fiancé is some kind of assassin? That she's been planning to poison you since before we met? Do you even hear how paranoid that sounds?" My father pulled out his phone, scrolled briefly, and turned the screen toward me. It showed a security camera image, grainy but recognizable, of Rachel standing outside Lawrence Development Group headquarters. 6 months before she and I had supposedly met by chance. "This is from our building security," he said calmly. "There are 12 more images spanning 8 months prior to your accidental meeting. She was watching us, Ethan, watching you." I stared at the image, my mind refusing to process the implications. "This could be anyone. It's not clear enough." "I've already had it analyzed," he cut in. "It's her, and we have more." Before I could respond, a doctor approached, young, with tired eyes and the tense posture of someone delivering difficult news. "Mr. Lawrence?" She glanced between us, unsure which Lawrence she was addressing. "I'm Ethan Lawrence, Rachel's fiancé," I said quickly. "How is she?" "She's stabilized," the doctor explained, consulting her tablet. "We've identified the toxin, a compound called saxitoxin, primarily found in certain shellfish, but this appears to be a synthetic variant. It causes temporary paralysis before attacking the cardiovascular system. Had she ingested more, it would have appeared as heart failure." My father stood. "That's rather specific and unusual, isn't it, doctor?" "Extremely," she confirmed. "This isn't something accidentally consumed. The concentration suggests intentional preparation." "Will there be long-term damage?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "We don't think so. We've cleared most of it from her system. Can I see her?" The doctor nodded. "She's heavily sedated but conscious. 5 minutes only." The private room my mother had secured was quiet, except for the rhythmic beeping of monitors. Rachel lay pale against white sheets, an IV dripping fluids into her arm. When she saw me, tears welled in her eyes. "Ethan," she whispered, "I'm so sorry." I took her hand, noting how cold her fingers felt. "What happened? What was in that food?" She turned her face away, tears tracking silently down her cheeks. "It was meant for him. He ruined everything, like he did back then. I knew who he really was." "What are you talking about? You've never met my father before tonight." I leaned closer, trying to make sense of her words. "Rachel, you're not making sense." Her eyes, normally sharp and focused, seemed to stare beyond me to something distant. He abandoned her, left her with nothing while he built his empire, all those years alone. Her voice trailed off, then strengthened. "Ask him about Catherine. Ask him what he did 25 years ago." "Catherine? Who is Catherine?" I pressed. But Rachel's eyes fluttered closed, the sedation pulling her back under. A nurse appeared at my shoulder. "I'm sorry, Mr. Lawrence. She needs to rest now." When I returned to the waiting room, my father was on his phone, issuing rapid-fire instructions to someone. My mother sat nearby, her perfect posture a defense against the chaos unfolding around her. "I want full background, everything going back 20 years, my father was saying. "School records, employment history, family connections, especially anything related to Catherine." "Yes, tonight." He ended the call when he saw me. "She'll live," I said coldly. "Though I'm not sure you care." He pocketed his phone. "She mentioned Catherine, didn't she?" The name meant nothing to me, but the look on my father's face told me everything. My mother's sharp intake of breath behind me confirmed it. "Victor," she warned quietly. "Not here." "Who is Catherine?" I demanded. My father's expression hardened, the mask of the businessman replacing any momentary vulnerability. "A ghost," he replied. "One I thought was long buried." "No more cryptic bullshit," I snapped, my voice rising enough that a nearby nurse glanced our way. "My fiancée just tried to kill herself. Or you. I don't even know which anymore. You're going to tell me exactly who Catherine is and what she has to do with Rachel?" My mother stood, placing a restraining hand on my arm. "Ethan, please. This isn't the place." "Then where is the place, Mom?" "Because for 28 years, it seems. Like there's never been the right place or time to tell me whatever this secret is." My father refused to discuss Catherine further that night, instead insisting I return to the penthouse at the Four Seasons, where he and my mother were staying. "Rachel will be sedated until morning. You need rest, and we need privacy." I didn't sleep. How could I? The woman I loved lay in a hospital bed after attempting to poison my father, raving about someone named Catherine and events from 25 years ago. The security footage showing Rachel outside my father's office months before we'd met played on endless loop in my mind. At dawn, my father knocked on my door, already dressed in a fresh suit. No sign of the previous night's chaos evident, except for the tightness around his eyes. "Get dressed," he said. "There's someone you need to meet." The car took us to an unremarkable office building in Lincoln Park. The discreet brass plaque beside the entrance read only, "Kirkland and Associates." Inside, a gray-haired man in his 70s greeted my father with the familiarity of long acquaintance. "Victor," he said, shaking my father's hand. "I pulled everything we have." "Ethan, this is James Kirkland," my father explained. "He's been my attorney for 40 years and the keeper of certain sensitive matters." The old lawyer nodded to me, his expression grave. I wish we were meeting under better circumstances. We followed him to a conference room where several folders were neatly arranged on the table. "I'll give you privacy," Kirkland said, closing the door behind him. My father sat heavily, suddenly looking every day of his 62 years. "Before we begin, I want you to understand that my investigation started the moment Rachel collapsed. Private investigators, DNA samples taken from her hairbrush, deep background checks. The Lawrence family machinery went into overdrive overnight." "You had her DNA tested without consent? That's illegal," I protested. "So is attempted murder," he countered. "What I've learned makes legal niceties seem somewhat irrelevant." He pushed the first folder toward me. "Open it." Inside were adoption papers, a birth certificate with the name Catherine Lawrence, and a paternity test result showing a 99.9% match to Victor Lawrence. "You have a sister," my father said quietly. "I was young, poor, alone. Her mother, Melissa, was my girlfriend in college. She died in childbirth while I was working 2 jobs trying to make rent. I couldn't raise a child. I was barely surviving myself, so I signed her away. I stared at the photo of a baby with dark hair, trying to see some resemblance to myself, to my father. The image was faded, clinical, a documentation rather than a keepsake. Why didn't you ever tell me? My father's jaw tightened. By the time you were born, I had remarried, built my business. Your mother and I discussed it. We decided the past seemed irrelevant. Irrelevant. I stood up, knocking the chair backward, my voice rising. You abandoned your own daughter, and you never thought I had the right to know I had a sister? Half-sister, he corrected automatically, then winced at his own words. It wasn't that simple, Ethan. I made arrangements. I paid for everything. Her education, medical care, extracurricular activities. She wanted for nothing. Except a father, I shot back. Except knowing where she came from, who her family was. Something flickered across my father's face. Regret, perhaps, though I'd rarely seen him display it. I tracked her over the years. She grew up in a good home in Michigan with David and Helen Martin. They were good people, a doctor and a professor. She was bright, did well in school. Then, when she was 16, her adoptive parents died in a car accident on the way home from her piano recital. She disappeared from the system after that. I lost track of her. He pushed another folder toward me. This contains everything we know about Rachel Parker. The file was surprisingly thin. Birth certificate from Ohio, bachelor's degree in art history from the University of Michigan, employment records from various galleries and museums, leading to her current position at the Chicago Institute of Art. There's not much here, I noted. Exactly, my father agreed. Before age 22, Rachel Parker barely existed. The birth certificate is real, but there are no school records, no medical history, nothing you'd expect from a normal childhood. So you think? I couldn't finish the sentence, the implication too disturbing. My father slid another document across the desk, a DNA comparison. The test shows a familial match. Rachel Parker shares genetic markers with both you and me. The probability is overwhelming. She's Catherine, I whispered. It appears so. My world collapsed. The woman I loved, the woman I planned to marry, was my half-sister. And she knew it. She had planned it all, meeting me, making me fall in love with her, getting close to our family. She wanted revenge, I whispered, feeling physically ill as the implications cascaded through my mind. Had she been laughing at me all this time? Had every kiss, every intimate moment been part of her calculated revenge against a father who abandoned her? Yes, my father agreed grimly, though poisoning seems extreme, even for justified anger. Justified? I echoed incredulously. You're saying you deserve this? He ran a hand through his silver hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty. I'm saying I understand her rage. What I don't understand is why she didn't simply confront me, why the elaborate deception involving you. To make it hurt more, I realized, the twisted logic becoming clear. She wanted you to watch your son, fall in love with her, to build a future with her before she destroyed everything. She wanted to take away your son like you took away her chance at a family. Our apartment felt like a museum of lies. Her clothes still hung in the closet. Her perfume lingered in the bathroom, but the woman I thought I knew had never existed. I wandered from room to room, searching for something, anything that might reveal the real Rachel, or Catherine, or whoever she was. In our bedroom, I noticed her nightstand drawer slightly ajar. Inside was a leather-bound journal I'd given her for her birthday 6 months earlier. The inscription read, "For all your thoughts and dreams, all my love, Ethan." I knew I shouldn't read it, but I needed answers. The weight of it felt wrong in my hands, heavier than it should have been. When I opened it, I discovered why. The pages were densely filled with tight, meticulous handwriting, different from Rachel's usual flowing script. More controlled, more deliberate. The entries started 3 years ago, detailing her discovery of Victor Lawrence, her biological father, and her systematic plan to infiltrate his life. She documented finding me at a gallery opening, engineering our chance, meeting, cultivating my affection. Every step calculated for maximum destruction. July 15, 2022. Located EL at the Palmer House charity auction. Made contact via spilled drink. He reacted as expected, gentlemanly, apologetic despite it being my fault. Mentioned appreciation for Rothko, which aligned with background research. Phase 1 initiated. October 3, 2022. EL introduced me to his mother today. She was suspicious but polite, asked pointed questions about my family background, stuck to established cover story. EL defended me, showing attachment is growing, according to schedule. December 24, 2022. EL proposed tonight with family heirloom. 6.3 carats, emerald cut, platinum setting, approximately $350,000 value, accepted with appropriate emotional display. VL still avoiding meeting, mother's interference, need to accelerate timeline. Reading her clinical assessment of our relationship was like having ice water injected into my veins. The woman who had cried in my arms when I proposed had been calculating the value of the ring while accepting it. The woman who had made love to me had been ticking boxes on a revenge checklist. But as I turned the pages, inconsistencies emerged. Dates that didn't align, references to childhood memories that contradicted earlier entries, emotional outbursts that broke through the methodical planning. I dreamed about the fire again. I can still hear her screaming. Why didn't I wake up sooner? Why? Saw a man who looked like David today. Followed him 6 blocks before realizing. It couldn't be him. He's been dead for 8 years. I need to focus. And most troubling, tucked between pages, a yellowed newspaper clipping about the death of Catherine Lawrence in a foster home fire when she was 17. The article mentioned only one survivor, a roommate named Rachel Parker, who suffered severe burns and smoke inhalation. If Catherine had died, then who was Rachel? And why was she claiming to be Catherine? The final entries became increasingly erratic, the handwriting less controlled. Sometimes I forget who I am, which memories are mine and which are hers. Does it matter anymore? We became the same person that night. Her pain is my pain. Her father is my target. EL is kind, undeserving of what's coming, collateral damage. Cannot afford emotional attachment. Remember the plan. Remember Catherine. The final entry, dated the day before our dinner with my parents, read simply, "Tomorrow Victor Lawrence will finally pay for what he did to her. I will finish what Catherine started." I took the diary to my father the next morning, watching his face as he read through the entries. The color drained from his features page by page, his customary mask of control slipping. "She's not Catherine," he said finally, closing the journal with a trembling hand. "Then who is she?" He turned to the newspaper clipping. "According to this, Catherine died in a fire at her foster home after her adoptive parents passed away. This would have been about 7 years ago. But the DNA matched," I insisted. "You showed me the test results." "To a point," my father admitted, his usual confidence absent. "The results showed familial connection, but not as strong as parent-child. I was so shocked by any match that I didn't question it deeply enough. The lab called this morning with a more detailed analysis. The markers indicate a relationship more distant than parent-child, possibly cousins or another close relative. That doesn't make sense. Catherine didn't have any relatives. You said her mother died and you were an only child." My father couldn't meet my eyes. "Melissa, Catherine's mother, had a younger sister. She was 14 when Catherine was born. I lost touch with her after the adoption." A cold realization settled over me. "You're saying Rachel could be Catherine's cousin? Her aunt's daughter?" "It's possible. The timing fits. Why would her aunt's daughter want revenge on you?" My father stared out the window at the Chicago skyline, the physical manifestation of his success built over decades. "Because I abandoned Catherine, and then I failed her again. After her adoptive parents died, I knew she was in the system. I could have stepped forward then, claimed her, given her a home, but He trailed off. "You what?" I demanded. "I was afraid of the scandal," he admitted, the words clearly painful. "Afraid of what your mother would say, how it would affect you, how it would impact the company's public image. So I arranged for financial support through intermediaries, but I remained in the shadows. By the time I reconsidered, she was dead." I thought of the diary entries, the rage and grief simmering beneath Rachel's calculated plan. And Rachel, Catherine's friend or cousin or whoever she is, blames you for Catherine's death. "With good reason," my father said quietly. "We hired forensic document analysts who confirmed that many entries in the diary had been written in different inks, at different times. The story had been constructed layer by layer to create a coherent narrative of revenge. More investigation revealed the complex truth. Rachel Parker had been Catherine's roommate at the foster home, where both girls had been placed after losing their families. Rachel's parents had died in a house fire when she was 12, leaving her with severe burns across her back and arms, scars I'd seen but never questioned, accepting her explanation of a childhood accident. The girls had become inseparable, sisters, in every way but blood. When Catherine discovered her birth father's identity and his wealth, she became obsessed with understanding why he had abandoned her. She just wanted to know why, Rachel had written in one entry. Why he could throw her away and start a perfect new family like she never existed. Catherine had planned to confront my father, but the night before she intended to do so, the fire broke out in their foster home. The official report cited faulty wiring, but Rachel's account in the diary suggested more sinister possibilities. Hints that Catherine had been targeted after she'd begun making inquiries about the powerful Victor. Lawrence. Rachel, the only survivor of the fire, spent months in the burn unit. During her recovery, she found Catherine's research about the Lawrence family and became convinced that my father was somehow responsible for the fire that killed her friend. Whether true or paranoid delusion, this belief fueled her determination to finish what Catherine had started. "She was brighter than me, prettier than me, better than me in every way," Rachel wrote. "But I'm the one who survived. There has to be a reason. I have to make her death mean something." So Rachel Parker, orphaned and alone, crafted a new identity using the fragments of Catherine's research and her own traumatic past. She studied my father, learned everything about his business and his family, and positioned herself to complete what Catherine had started, the destruction of the man who had abandoned her. What neither of us could have anticipated was that I would become the primary weapon in her arsenal. A week after Rachel disappeared from the hospital, security cameras at Lawrence Tower captured her entering the building using an access card that should have been deactivated. The footage showed her walking confidently past the reception desk as if she belonged there, her dark hair now cut short, wearing the kind of elegant business attire that was the uniform of Lawrence executives. She took my father's private elevator directly to the executive floor, again using credentials that showed she had planned this infiltration long before the disastrous dinner. By the time security alerted my father and I arrived at his office, the damage was done. My father sat at his desk, a glass of scotch untouched before him, staring at files scattered across the surface. His face had the ashen look of a man who had just received a terminal diagnosis. "You're too late," he said without looking up when I burst into the room. "She's gone." "What did she take?" I demanded. "Everything." He gestured helplessly at the papers. "She had documentation of every questionable deal I've ever made. Tax evasion, bribes to city officials, property acquired through less than legal means, decades of shortcuts and compromises that built this." He gestured to the cityscape outside his window, the Lawrence name emblazoned on 3 separate buildings visible from where we stood. "How did she get that information?" I asked. "Those files should be protected, encrypted." "She didn't need to steal it," my father said, his voice hollow. "Catherine had already gathered most of it. Apparently, my daughter was quite the investigator. Before she died, Rachel just finished the collection. What happens now?" He drained his glass in a single swallow, something I'd never seen him do. My father was always controlled, measured, a man who sipped expensive scotch precisely because it wasn't meant to be gulped. Now, the Justice Department gets an anonymous package. The Securities and Exchange Commission opens an investigation. The IRS conducts an audit. The Lawrence name becomes synonymous with corruption. Everything I built collapses. "We can fight this," I insisted, reaching for my phone. "I'll call our legal team. We'll get ahead of it, release a statement." "Don't bother," my father interrupted, looking suddenly older than his years. "The evidence is irrefutable. I've been working the system for decades, Ethan. I know exactly how damning these documents are because I created them. So you're just giving up?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Victor Lawrence never surrendered, never showed weakness. "The only question now," he continued as if I hadn't spoken, "is whether I destroy the family by fighting, dragging your mother and you through years of legal battles, public humiliation, possible criminal charges, or salvage what's left of your future by confessing to everything and making a deal." "What kind of deal?" "The kind where I take full responsibility, where I protect the people who followed my orders, where I make sure the Lawrence name survives, even if I don't." I stared at him, this man I had both feared and idolized my entire life, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. "You knew this day might come. You've been planning for it." He nodded slightly. "I've never been under any illusions about what I've done, Ethan. I've made contingencies. Your future, your mother's future, is protected. The legitimate aspects of the business have been separated from my personal holdings for years. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted better for you," he said simply. "I wanted you to believe in the legend, not the man. I thought of Rachel, of Catherine, of the generations of destruction flowing from one man's decisions. She won't get away with this, I promised. Whatever her grievance, poisoning you and stealing documents doesn't make her right." My father's expression was resigned, almost peaceful. "Perhaps not, but it does make her effective." But Rachel Parker had already disappeared as completely as she had appeared in my life. The offshore account I had set up for our future, $20 million as a wedding gift from my father, was emptied within hours of her visit to Lawrence Tower. The engagement, a Lawrence family heirloom worth millions, vanished with her. The Lawrence empire unraveled with stunning speed. My father pled guilty to reduced charges, tax fraud, securities violations, corruption, in exchange for testifying against several prominent Chicago officials who had facilitated his more questionable deals over the decades. The scandal dominated Chicago media for months. "Lawrence legacy built on lies," screamed the Tribune headline. "Real estate mogul's empire crumbles," declared the Sun-Times. Journalists who had once courted my father's favor now dissected his fall with gleeful enthusiasm, each revelation more damaging than the last. Lawrence Tower was sold to cover legal settlements. The family estate in Lake Forest went to satisfy tax penalties. My mother filed for divorce, claiming she had been unaware of his business practices, a fiction we all pretended to believe for the sake of her social standing. She retreated to her family's estate in Connecticut, changing her name back to her maiden name, erasing the Lawrence connection as thoroughly as she could. I remained in Chicago, living in a modest apartment in Lincoln Park, sorting through the wreckage. My father's legal team had done their job well. The legitimate portions of the business had indeed been insulated. I was left with enough to start over, a small development company focused on affordable housing projects, the antithesis of my father's luxury developments. For months I hired private investigators to track Rachel Parker, but she had vanished completely. The woman who had been prepared to marry me, who had shared my bed, my home, my life, had executed her plan with surgical precision, leaving no loose ends. My father, stripped of his fortune and reputation, served his sentence at a minimum security federal prison in Minnesota. I visited once a month, watching the proud man I had known become a shadow, still calculating, still planning, but confined to a world where his manipulations had no real power. She was meticulous, he noted during one visit, seeming almost impressed despite everything. Patient, thorough. She would have made an excellent Lawrence. "She destroyed us," I reminded him. "We destroyed ourselves," he countered. "She just exposed what was already there." 3 years passed. I rebuilt my life slowly, forming a smaller, cleaner company from the ashes of my father's disgrace. I focused on projects that benefited communities rather than exploited them. Affordable housing developments, mixed-use spaces that preserved neighborhood character, buildings with environmental considerations my father would have dismissed as unprofitable idealism. I even found love again, cautiously, with Emma, a civil rights attorney who had actually opposed one of my father's developments years earlier. She knew exactly who I was, what my family had done, and loved me anyway. Or perhaps because I was determined to be different. But Rachel Parker's ghost lingered. I still woke sometimes from dreams where she laughed at me, where she whispered that she had never loved me, that every kiss had been calculated, every intimate moment a move in her game of revenge. Then, on a business trip to New York, I saw her. It was at an art auction at Christie's, a charity event benefiting foster children, ironically enough. I was there representing my company as a sponsor when I spotted her across the crowded room. Her hair was shorter, dyed a rich auburn, instead of the chocolate brown I had known. She wore an elegant black dress that accentuated her slender figure, diamond earrings catching the light as she laughed at something her companion said. For a moment I thought I was hallucinating, projecting her face onto a stranger. But then, our eyes met across the room and I knew. The slight widening of her eyes, the momentary freezing of her features, confirmed it was her before her practiced composure returned. She didn't flinch or run. Instead, after a brief hesitation, she walked directly toward me, champagne flute in hand, as if we were old acquaintances running into each other at a social event. "You look well, Ethan," she said, her voice exactly as I remembered it. That slight huskiness that had once made my name sound like an endearment. "Better than my father," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "He died last month. Heart failure, ironically." Something flickered across her face. Not remorse exactly, but acknowledgement. "I read about it. I'm sorry for your loss." "Are you?" I asked. "You destroyed him." "No," she corrected gently, her gaze level. He destroyed himself long before I came along. I just made sure there were consequences. And Catherine? Was she just a convenient excuse? Rachel's composure faltered briefly, pain flashing in her eyes before she controlled it. Catherine was everything to me, the sister I never had. When she learned who her father was, what he had done, abandoning her, then building this perfect life with his real family, it broke her. She obsessed over him, over all of you.